Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us after a long day at work. It is a pleasure to join with you this evening on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, with whom we gratefully share the land. My name is Valentina Cureliu. I am a department head of history with 35 years of teaching experience with the Toronto District School Board. Presently, I serve as the Director of Education at the Holodomor Research and Education Consortium, commonly known as HREC, at the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, University of Alberta, with offices in Toronto. Our HREC was established in 2013 thanks to the generous support of the Temerté Foundation, for which we are grateful. Because this year is the 90th anniversary commemorating Ukraine's genocide, the Holodomor, we created a special Webinars for Educators series, which focuses on recently published historical fiction centering on the Holodomor. And tonight is the first in that series. I am proud to introduce our hosts for the evening, Mateusz Swieclicki, who is an assistant professor at the University of Wrocław, Institute of English Studies in Poland. He's the director of the Center for Young People's Literature and Culture and the co-founder of the Center for Research in Children's and Young Adult Literature. His upcoming book, Next Generation Memory and Ukrainian Canadian Children's Historical Fiction, The Seeds of Memory, examines the transnational entanglements of Canada and Ukraine. He was a research scholar at the University of Florida's Department of English, Kosciuszko Foundation Fellowship, a Fulbright scholar at the University of Illinois in Chicago, a visiting scholar at the University of Toronto, and has held multiple other fellowships. Dr. Swieclicki is the author of more than 60 scholarly publications in English, Polish, Ukrainian, and Croatian. His work has appeared in many journals, including Children's Literature and Education and Bookbird. He is the deputy editor-in-chief of Forchuk, a member of the educational team of John Benjamin's Publishing's Children's Literature, Culture, and Cognition series, and a representative of the Childhood and Youth Network of the Social Science History Association. Mateusz, the screen is yours.
Thank you. I am pleased to introduce an author who probably needs no introduction because her books can be found in most North American school libraries. Marcia Forchuk Skrypuch is one of the most prolific and successful Canadian children's authors. Since 1996, she has published more than 20 popular children's books, including meticulously researched novels and picture books about the Armenian genocide and Vietnamese refugees. However, it is Ukraine which has remained the central theme in her work ever since the publication of Silver Threads more than 2 decades ago. In this picture book, illustrated by Michael Marchenko, Skrypuch introduced to Canadian children's literature the history of the First World War internment of Ukrainians. Enough, published 4 years after Silver Threads, and also illustrated by Marchenko, was the first picture book about the Holodomor. In her most successful historical novels for young readers, the 2 Second World War trilogies issued by Scholastic, featuring the best-selling Making Bombs for Hitler and Don't Tell the Nazis, Skrypuch writes about the distinctiveness of the Ukrainian position during the Second World War, a nation trapped between 2 antagonistic regimes, and the post-war immigration to Canada. In the preface to Kobzar's Children, an anthology of Ukrainian-themed historical fiction, poetry, and memoirs edited by Skrypuch, she explains that it is her passion to write stories that capture real experiences that have been suppressed or lost, because when you don't write your own stories, someone else will write their version for you. The volume includes Skrypuch's 2 short stories, The Red Boots and The Rings. The latter talks about the Holodomor. Skrypuch's latest novel, entitled Winterkill has just been published. Now we will have the honor to listen to 3 excerpts from this remarkable novel read by the author. Marcia, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mateos, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I had been so focused on getting my niece settled that it wasn't until she was sleeping that I looked around our house. The bowl of pisankia had been smashed into a sickening mess of shattered eggshells and glass. Mama made a dozen or more pisankia every year, but they were gifted to friends. The ones she'd kept were very special. The oldest had been her own grandmother's engagement gift to her grandfather. My favorite was the swirly one she had made for Tato when they were just kids, but now they were just a mess of colorful shards. I looked at the walls and I realized that our icons were missing. In the corner near the door, there was no longer the white embroidered cloth with candles and a crucifix. The altar cloth had been replaced by a Soviet flag. A framed portrait of Stalin stood in the place of honor, and on either side of him was a miniature toy tractor. Who did that? I asked, pointing to where our prayer corner used to be. The truck drove past us. Even though I kept my head down and pretended not to look at it, I glanced at the driver out of the corner of my eye. A military cap and collar. The military? That would explain the trucks, but why would the army be visiting our neighbors? When we finally got inside our own house, I could hear the hum of a motor idling out back. Slavko noticed it too, and he opened his mouth to say something, but stopped when I put my finger on his lips. I crept out quietly, hiding in the shadows and behind the trees so that no one would see us. Slavko did the same, but a meter or so behind me. The side of our barn, where our wheat was stored, had been tethered open with a rope, and a military truck had backed up into it. 2 soldiers were lifting our sacks of grain and throwing them into the back of the truck. All our hard work, our exceptional crop. We weren't being paid for it. They were stealing it. I stepped forward and I said, "Excuse me, comrades, can I help you?" One of the soldiers ignored me, but the other one stopped and looked me up and down. "Go back to bed, kid," he said. "That's my family's grain," I said. "Why are you taking it? And in the middle of the night, no less." The soldier pulled out his pistol and he pointed it at my head. "Just leave," he said. "We have work to do." I put my hands up and I stumbled back a few steps. "Comrade, I'm asking a question, that's all. We pay our taxes, but you're taking everything, and in the middle of the night." I'm counting to 3. "If you don't get out of here, you're dead. 1, 2. Slavko grabbed my belt and he pulled me hard from behind. I nearly fell, but regained my balance. We ran from the barn, but hid behind a tree so that we could continue to watch them. When they finished loading our grain, one of them got a burlap bag from the truck and went to our garden. Slavko ran after the soldier. "Leave our garden alone," he said. The soldier ignored him. I watched helplessly as he filled up the bag with what vegetables we still had left there. I wished that Mama and Tato were home. Tato wouldn't stand for this. If an adult had ordered them to stop, they would have listened, wouldn't they? I ran and I stood beside Slavko in front of our small garden. A soldier with a burlap bag was kneeling in front of Mama's potatoes. I put my hands on my hips and I tried to make myself look like an adult. "You realize that this garden means the difference between my family living and dying over the next winter, don't you?" The soldier looked up. "This doesn't belong to you," he said. "It's being shipped to the cities. If you want to eat, join the kolkhoz." His words sent a chill through me. Ruslana said that the kolkhoz harvest had also been taken. And then it sunk in on me just how big Stalin's lie had been. "What are you thinking about?" I asked Alice. "About how beautiful all of this was," she said, raising her arms to include the sky, the fields, the meadows. "There's so much potential for happiness, for goodness here." "You're right about that," I said. We walked in silent contemplation for a couple of kilometers and then encountered a village. The clay cottages with their straw thatch roofs seemed so achingly familiar. And in normal times, I would have expected to see some chickens clucking around and maybe a cow in the pasture, but these were not normal times. In the heat of August, the village was quiet like winter. No people, no birds, and no insects. We followed the dirt road deeper into the village, and I wrinkled my nose at the stench. Alice put a hand over her mouth. She could smell it too. It was fainter than in Kharkiv, but unmistakable. At a time of year when everything should be bursting with life, this village was filled with death. We kept on walking, our heads bowed in sadness, past what had been a village square and past where a church had been, but now was just rubble. Reclining against the doorstep of the last house was a young girl, maybe 6 years old. At first I thought she was dead, but then she slowly opened her eyes. Her lips moved, but no words came out. We went up to her and knelt beside her. "Bread," she whispered. I opened my shoulder bag. I had a small piece of the soft bread from the night before. I placed it in her hand. The girl tried to bring it to her lips, but she was too weak. I broke off a bit and I put it between her teeth, but her mouth was too dry. Alice took the tin can from her bag and went to the back of the house. She reappeared moments later, the tin can filled with water. She held it to the girl's lips. The girl took a sip. Once she'd swallowed a bit of the water, I placed the bread back on her tongue. She closed her mouth and slowly chewed. A smile transformed her face. "That is the most wonderful meal I have ever tasted," said the girl. "I can die happy now." We stayed sitting with the girl and offered her more bread, but she said that she was full. "Can you sing to me?" she asked. I have a terrible singing voice, but started a kolosanka that Mama sang to me as a baby about rocking in a cradle. It was one that Uncle Ilya and Auntie Paulina had recorded in their manuscript. Alice knew it too, and she joined in. The little girl looked so content that we sang it over and over. I thought the girl had fallen asleep, but Alice put her fingers to the girl's neck. "She's no longer with us," she said. We didn't want to leave her sitting in the doorway. In the end, I carried her gently in my arms to the church cemetery, and we laid her body on one of the graves. Alice and I wrapped our arms around each other and wept. We had been immersed in death for so long that I thought we had become hardened to it, but seeing this little girl die before our eyes was the breaking point. "We don't even know her name," I said. "She wasn't alone when she died," said Alice. She gathered up a handful of dirt and sprinkled it over the girl. Together, we sang Vichnaya Pamyat, and then we walked out of the village and down the road.
Thank you, Marcia. Winterkill is your third text about the Holodomor. Why did you decide to return to the topic of the famine of 1932-1933?
The works that I had written before were not complete. Enough is for younger readers, and The Rings is just a short story. I had been wanting to write a novel set during the Holodomor for quite a while, but I didn't know whether I could get it published. And I didn't know whether I had the emotional fortitude to write it, because honestly, this book nearly broke me to write it. But the turning point for me was I was taken out for dinner by my editor at Scholastic in New York, and there were other people from Scholastic US there. One woman, her name is Jana Hausman, was there, and she's with Scholastic Book Fairs, and she has done missionary work in Ukraine. And she said to me, "You need to write a middle grade novel set during the Holodomor." I was stunned because I didn't think that Scholastic would publish something like that, because nobody knows about it, right? You know, millions can die and no one knows about it. I decided that I would do that. And Scholastic has been incredibly supportive, both Scholastic Canada and Scholastic Inc. I have so much support, every single level of the people in Scholastic. They want to tell these stories that haven't been told, that have been suppressed, and they just support me 100%. And so even when I wrote this, it took me 3 full rewrites to get it right, because it was honestly, like, it just emotionally broke me. So as I was writing it, I was avoiding writing it.
Thank you. Winterkill is significantly different from your other Holodomor themed book texts, as you have already mentioned. Enough is directed at younger readers, and The Rings at both, I would say, adults and young adults. For whom did you write Winterkill?
So Winterkill is really for everybody, even though it is a middle grade novel. What I like about middle grade literature is that a lot of adults will read it, because they know that middle grade literature, especially historical, has a reputation for being historically accurate and entertaining, and just leaves out all the words that people tend to skip over. But I really respect a young audience, and to me, middle grade kids are the most intelligent audience, and I want to write for intelligent people who have empathy and who don't want to be disrespected. They know what it's like. Middle grade kids, young kids, know what it's like for people to assume that they don't know things. And that is my audience, because they are the smartest audience out there.
Thank you. It definitely makes sense, and I totally agree. Respecting, young people is of great importance. So let's talk about the title, because the word Winterkill appears in the book twice. It is the title of chapter 16, and it is mentioned in chapter 29, page 248, where Nil, the narrator, says, "There are more than a dozen villages between the outskirts of Kharkiv and the border between Ukraine and Russia, and all of those villages were terrible in their similarities, like Winterkill in the heat of August." Can you explain the meaning of the title?
Neil is a farmer. He's a wheat farmer. And the thing that most wheat farmers fear most is Winterkill, unless they happen to be living under a Stalinist genocide. And what Winterkill is you plant winter wheat, which is the best wheat, but you plant it in the fall. And it doesn't really germinate unless there's a really good snowfall, and the weather just has to be perfect. And there's always this risk of Winterkill, and you don't know until the snow starts to melt. And then you go out and you inspect it and you see whether you're going to have a crop or not. And to me, it was just such an important symbol of what was happening in Soviet Ukraine during the Holodomor, because people had such hope and expectation, and they kept on being lied to, and then dashed at the last minute, realizing that no, they can't believe anything that they have been told, that they're supposed to starve. My father was a wheat farmer, and so as I was writing this, I was once a week I would talk to him on the phone, and I'd tell him where I was in the book. And he kept on talking about Winterkill a lot. And so it had to be the title. I had no choice. And so it did become sort of like the unifying symbol in so many ways.
Thank you. And also, because of this title, we get this really, I think, beautiful and powerful cover.
Yes.
Which has so many different meanings. Yeah.
Yes.
You frequently visit North American schools. Has the knowledge of the Holodomor among educators and readers increased between the publication of Enough in 2000, 22 years ago, and Winterkill earlier this month? Has anything really changed?
I've noticed a real transformation this fall, thanks to HREC Ed, because I've been doing virtual visits sponsored by HREC Ed. Part of the responsibility of the school is to look at the learning resources that are at holodomor.ca. And so I am contacted by teachers after, and they are blown away that, many who had a degree in history and had never heard of the Holodomor, and so now feel a moral responsibility to teach it and talk about it. I had a teacher contact me with a Twitter message, what else, right? But saying that her students were just a buzz about Winterkill. And I think it's because, the penny dropped, or I guess it's a nickel, because in Canada, we don't have pennies anymore. The penny dropped, people realize, and they also realize that what's happening in Ukraine right now, if people had paid attention before to, the risk of dictatorships, the risk of an entire group being killed and then having it hidden, then maybe some of these things wouldn't be happening. And so I have noticed a difference, but it's really because of the resources that have been provided. So it's sort of like it fits together like pieces of a puzzle, because my book is an entryway for a lot of people who would not have known about the Holodomor in the first place, but they were attracted to my books. But then there are the resources that help and make them realize that, this is the magnitude of it is just so massive.
I think that it's very important that your book was published by a major, press, and it has received great distribution. You can find it at all bookstores in Canada. And maybe because of your book, these teachers and educators will find all of the other books which are also there, and they will realize that there are other great, materials which can be used in the classroom. You've mentioned something very important, the responsibility. Alice, the main female character in Winterkill, is Canadian. She's Ukrainian Canadian. Was it difficult to include this Canadian component while remaining historically accurate? Because your book is historically accurate, of course. Can you say something more about it?
Yes, absolutely. I was inspired to create the character of Alice by the real Alice, who Ray Kleiman, the real journalist, Canadian journalist, met when she was able to go and eyewitness the Holodomor. So there are scenes in Winterkill that are based on Ray Kleiman's actual experiences when she traveled into the famine areas. And so it was an easy entry for me to include Canadian content, and also like the Canadian collaboration really with the Holodomor. And I also felt a moral responsibility because my own grandfather, who came to Canada before World War I and was interned, and the inspiration for Silver Threads, after he was interned, he joined the Communist Party of Canada. My first time voting, I voted for the Communist Party of Canada. So I'm one of those useful fools. My grandfather was a useful fool. And I think that it's really important for us all to realize that we are all at risk of being useful fools, especially if we think we're really smart. Elon Musk comes to mind. This is a risk that we have. And so for me, I had to include Alice for the humility of who I could have been if I had been born during the Holodomor. I could have gone with my father and done the same thing that Alice did with her father, thinking that collectivization was a good thing and actually collaborating with the killing of people.
Thank you. Finally, what is the most important thing that you want your audiences to remember or learn from Winterkill?
The big thing for me, it's a quote from Stalin that, one death is a tragedy, but a million is a statistic. And I don't want people to think of the Holodomor as a statistic of millions. I want them to think of Alice, and I want them to think of Neil, but I want them to step into the shoes of either Alice or Neil and feel what it's like to be tricked and in increments starved to death, and then to look all around and see the vast landscape of death around you. I want the reader to have empathy and to step inside what it was like to be in the midst of that, because that's the only way that we can change. Reading history is the only way that we can change the future. And so that's really what I want for the readers of Winterkill to keep in mind.
Thank you, Marcia. Winterkill is definitely a must-read middle grade novel, which, as Marcia has already said, older readers will also enjoy. Most importantly, it is historically accurate, but contains no overly graphic scenes, making it perfect for use in the classroom. Valentina, do you have any comments you want to make at this time?
I agree with you. It is definitely a very worthwhile fictional novel for middle year students, junior high school. And I agree with you, Marcia, that it's also good for adults. I read it with great pleasure. My parents had survived the Holodomor, and I lived with the knowledge of what happened to them. So for me, it was very gratifying. Even though I work on the Holodomor all the time, it was interesting to see how you framed it, and that was very good. So it also addresses the question of historical genocide, which I think is very important and a theme that is very common in many classrooms across Canada and the United States. And of course, and it is an issue about human rights and their abuse. It's both a difficult and sensitive subject to get across to students. And it's done empathetically through the interaction of characters in the story. And so I think that kudos to you for being able to do this. In the narrative, there are many examples of the abuse of the rights of the child in Soviet Ukraine throughout the novel, which you can use in the classroom as well. And teachers can actually compare what was happening to children in the Soviet society in the 30s with our democratic values and the rights of children in Canada today. So I think that's a very important point. And I also enjoyed the fact that Alice was a Canadian, a young character who admits that her father believes in the lies they were told in leftist Canada. But she had a willingness and courage to change her thinking when she was faced with Nil's reality as a father, as a farmer's son in Ukraine. Very, very well done. I thought that was really outstanding. She is also an example for youth of applying critical thinking skills when faced with a different reality than what she was taught, and courageously acting on her newfound understanding. So I think that's really great. She's a hero, basically, like Clarea Kleiman. Both of the main characters in the novel show resilience in various ways in trying to help others and each other to survive from this horrendous, during this horrendous tragedy. So there are good examples of life skills being formed, problem solving, and resilience for young people. Now I'd like to turn things over to Mateusz and for him to facilitate the question and answer section.
Thank you, Valentina, for these fantastic comments. The question which we do have is about the cover. The cover is clearly a reference to the Holodomor Memorial in Kyiv. Do you have any creative input into the cover?
No, but I am so lucky because having Scholastic as my publisher means that the best creative minds are at work on my behalf. If you see the covers that they have done for all of the books, the World War II, the two World War II trilogies, they are just outstanding. They also know what young people want to see on a book, like what will make them pick it up. Because the other thing about Scholastic is that they don't do school books. These are not school books. These are books that kids read on purpose. So they buy at Scholastic book fairs, they'll buy in a bookstore. And so it means that the book has to appeal to a young person. I don't have the expertise. I think that it's always important for everyone to understand the limits of their own expertise. I can tell you there's a whole lot of stuff that I don't do well. And so I defer to the people who do.
So when it comes to this cover, I actually have another question directly connected to the cover. Was it something that the publisher added later on? I'm talking about the Stalin is starving their nation. Can the Ukrainian people fight to survive? Because looking at the other covers of your books, there's no mention of Ukraine, and here Ukraine is mentioned directly. Can you tell us why? Was it done on purpose?
You are just so perceptive. Initially, it didn't say Stalin. It said a tyrant is starving their nation. I don't even think it said Ukrainian people. So it would have said a tyrant is starving the the nation? Can the people survive? Is, I think, what it said. And then the war started. And then people knew what Ukraine was. So there was this weird thing that happened. Even though my books are very popular, people don't know that I'm Ukrainian, which blows me away, because like half of the books that I've written are about my heritage. But, you know, I've been called Iranian, Jewish, Polish, you know, many different things. Canadian, of course, because I am. But they changed it, and I'm so grateful that they did, because people need to read Ukrainian history to really understand what's happening now with the war. So one thing that Putin did is he blasted out of the water a whole pile of disinformation about Ukraine without realizing it. He's done a huge favor in terms of smashing his own propaganda about Ukraine.
Definitely. We have some more questions. Will Ukrainian or Russian kids get to read this?
I don't have a contract for a Ukrainian edition or a Russian edition yet. You know, the various language rights of books is something that the rights manager at Scholastic looks after. And so many of my books do have various, you know, translated versions, but it's not something that I have control over. I would love to have this book particularly available in Russian, to tell you the truth.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Considering the legal status of Holodomor in the Russian Federation, I think that unfortunately it's quite unlikely. But who knows? Some of your characters return in other books. Do you plan to feature Neil or Alice in a future book? Will you return to the topic of Holodomor in a future book?
I had planned on writing a companion novel to Winterkill, and I probably still will. And if you see the sticky notes on my door behind me, those are actually sticky notes of scenes for the book that I had been working on when Russia's war, new genocide against Ukraine, started. I can't go there right now. So I have had to set it aside just for my own mental health. And I'm writing right now a novel about Roxolana set in, you know, medieval times. And so this is more comfortable for my brain right now, because to do presentations on Winterkill and to write the next one during the Stalin terror years would just break me. But what I really want to explore is Yulia. So that's the younger sister of Neil. And she completely bought into the whole Stalinist stuff and was, you know, a very avid young pioneer. And basically collaborated in the village with, you know, the killing of her own neighbors and even family. That's who I want to explore. I want to see her more fully explored in a novel.
And we're all looking forward to reading your novel about Roxolana, which is also much needed. I really think that English speakers should definitely be introduced to this wonderful character. Was this novel, of course I'm talking about Winterkill, harder to write than your others? You have an incredible ability to get inside the heads of your characters who are children and to give us a very emotional understanding of their perspective as they go through this reality. Does this detail come easy to you to write?
No, it's really hard. A lot of times when I'm writing, I'm weeping as I'm writing. And this book was particularly difficult because of just the magnitude of what happened. You know, the World War II ones weren't easy either. But this one, because it was just this, the magnitude of awful times a million. I had a moral responsibility to write this book. The whole team behind me. I have to say, Scholastic, the editorial in particular, was just so supportive, especially when I handed in, like, the first version of the novel was pretty bad. And my editor said to me, she says, you won't have like your kids, your avid readers turning these pages rapidly. And, okay. And it was because I was avoiding the bad, like the really bad stuff, because I couldn't emotionally go there. So they gave me the time and the support to actually write the novel that I needed to write, which is what it is now.
I like what you said, that it was not a page turner. And I think that is very important for middle grade novels, for young adult novels to be captivating. We need to make sure as writers, as educators, that the books we're writing or the books we're working with are captivating, because it's easier for the readers, for the kids to understand the complicated history when they're actually interested.
But the other thing too is adults also don't want to be bored to tears. And that's why so many adults end up reading middle grade novels, because they know that they're not going to be subjected to a whole page describing a doorknob or something. It is important to be a page turner, but also, I basically write for myself because I am dyslexic. I didn't learn to read till I was 9. And I basically just write the books that I wished were available to me, because I'm not a stupid person, but I have still a learning challenge. And so, I really dislike when people get put into boxes and that's them. There are so many really bright kids that I know, and I respect them so much. And I want to make sure that they can enjoy reading and that they can learn so much. They email me, and the things that these readers tell me, I'm just so blown away by the intelligence of young people.
Thank you. We have another question. You spoke about your responsibility as a writer. Do you have any rules or ethics you follow as an author of historical fiction?
That's a really good question. So yes, first of all, I write on topics that other people haven't written on. There are many stories that I would be interested in writing, but if I can find that book, I'll just read it instead of writing it. But pretty much every single book that I've written has been about a bit of history that has been completely ignored. And so I feel that I have the moral responsibility to write that, because I've been given the gift of being able to do it. So since I've been gifted with that, then I darn well better do it. It's also why I don't just write about Ukrainian history. The reason that I wrote Adrift at Sea, for example, which is about a 6-year-old Vietnamese boy escaping by boat, is because up till 2016, if you can believe it, there had never been a picture book written about, like from the point of view of a child, Vietnamese boat person. Like, I think that is horrific. That's why I did. And I co-wrote it with the actual boy. It's the same thing with the Armenian stories, because there were memoirs, but there were not novels. And so I felt a moral responsibility, especially if I wanted people to step into the shoes of Ukrainian history, then I'd darn well better be willing to spend the same amount of emotional currency on other people's stories as well.
Who's your favorite character in the novel, and why?
Slavko.
Oh, can you explain?
I didn't know that he would be so filled with his own ideas. He was doing things that I didn't expect. And it's the same thing when I was writing Making Bombs for Hitler. I really like Luca for the same reason. I had no intention of writing a whole book about Luca, but he made me, because he just, came into that novel and made his presence felt and became so essential for Lita. And it's the same thing with Slavko. He became an ally for his brother. He became almost like an older brother to his older brother in many ways. He made decisions that were really bad, but for all the right reasons. And I just found him charming. So I would say he's my favorite. I like Alice. My editor told me she was cold, especially in the first draft. And so that's like, I had her do as a dual narrative. And so I switched it so she wasn't one of the narrators anymore. And that changed, and she was no longer cold. But I thought that was pretty hilarious, because I basically based her on me. But she can't be my favorite character because she's too close to me. I adore Neil, of course, but Slavko really surprised me.
I think that Alice is a wonderful character, a very complex character, especially, considering the fact that it's a middle grade book. All of your characters are always really well-rounded. They're never just foil characters. We have a question which is about choosing an illustrator. And so I assume that it's not a question about Winterkill, but your picture books. And since enough is another picture book about the Holodomor. I think that we can definitely talk about it. How do you choose an illustrator? How do you choose the style for the illustrations? And I can just show one double spread to those of you who are not familiar with enough. So these are Michael Marchenko's illustrations, wonderful illustrations.
So my favorite illustration in that book is The Dictator.
I'll find it.
Oafish. I don't have any control over how the illustrator chooses to illustrate a book. I did have some control over who was the illustrator. Yes, I love that picture. And on the epaulets on his shoulders, those are little skulls. Marchenko is just brilliant. And so who would want to micromanage Michael Marchenko? So he actually says that this was his favorite book to illustrate of all the ones that he has done. Yeah, such a nice guy. When I wrote Silver Threads, which was my very first book, I made a request to the publisher that Michael Marchenko be the illustrator, and they said no, that he wasn't right for the book. And I just kept on being very persistent, which was not the right thing to do, seeing as I was just a first-time author, but I've never been known to do the right thing when it comes to dealing with publishers sometimes. They finally did listen to me, and they asked him, and he said no initially. And then the publisher called me up and said, just you give him a call because we think that you could convince him. And so I did. And he said, yes. I'm just so thrilled because he was the right person to do this. I can't think of anyone who could have done it the same. The first version of the illustrations he did for Enough, he had the characters starving. So instead of looking like Robert Munch type, cherubic characters, they were getting thinner and thinner. And then he just scratched that and started over and decided he just couldn't do it and had to stick more to the fable part of it, the fairy tale aspect of it. And so showed the characters more cherubic, like they weren't suffering from hunger as much as you would expect them to because of who the audience was.
Exactly. And I think that remembering about the audience is of great importance. And Enough, as I've already said, can also be used at the classroom. It's a really great book, especially because of its educational, value, but it's also beautifully written and illustrated.
So oftentimes I have gone to high schools, so grade 10 history classes in Ontario, done a session on Enough. And so now I know that I can use Winterkill and Enough together. But, picture books for grade 10 history are a really good mix.
And I think that picture books are important in introducing people to new topics. I mean, new to them, of course. And Enough is fantastic. And I'm very happy that there are new picture books about the Holodomor being published.
Yes.
That's really fantastic. It's very fantastic. And I'm very happy about it. How many drafts or edits did this book go through? You said 3, Winterkill, yes?
No, I mean 3 big ones. So 3 entire rewrite. So I rewrote the entire book in a month, and then it still wasn't where they wanted it to be. And so I basically started from scratch again and did it again in a month. And so we're talking 12-hour writing days. It was grueling, but it was probably the best way to do it because it was just so emotionally harrowing to write this book that to just plunge into the acid the way that I did was the only way to get through it. They were actually blown away that I was able to turn it around like that. But as all teachers who are listening know that their students do the best work when the deadline is looming.
Oh, yes. We have 2 questions. Let me combine them. I'm curious, what fable is Enough inspired by? And you mentioned how Enough has a fairy tale dimension. We don't often think about history in relation to fairy tales, but how might they be used to teach history?
And it actually sounds like something Anastasia might have asked, but I don't know whether that's true or not. But in any case,
one of them.
Was it?
One of them.
The folktale fairy tale that I used as the base was about a bag of wheat. And it was 2 brothers. No, it wasn't actually a bag of wheat, it was coins. And so it was just a fragment of a fairy tale that I had read, a Ukrainian fairy tale. And it was the one brother took too many coins. And so when he tried to steal the coins from this island. He plunged into the sea and was never seen again. And then the brother who knew only to take a little bit was able to get all the way back home again, because knew just to take enough gold coins and not like the whole kit and caboodle. To me, that was sort of like the whole thing. And when I read that, just, all sorts of pinging went off in my head. I was able to write enough 5 years later, because it takes about 5 years to write a picture book, for me anyway. Folktales, fairy tales were written in the past to teach people how to act. And so we ignore them at our peril. This is passed down through generations. And so we must look at fairy tales and we must look at folk tales and see what they are that we're being taught. And so I love reading folk tales and fairy tales for that reason, because I'm always looking for a way that I can use them, even in novels. It's not just a matter of in a picture book. You can use the story arc, you can use parts of it in a novel too. And
the final question, as you do your school visits, what questions do the students have for you? What are they most curious about in Winterkill? They want to know how much of it is true, because it just seems so unbelievable that something as big as this could happen. What I notice a lot, especially because of the current context, is kids who have had the opportunity to read the whole thing before I present to them make the connections to the war in Ukraine now. They make that connection. If the teacher has read it before and the kids haven't, the teacher makes the connection. And I get these emails ahead of time saying, like, oh my gosh, I just can't believe that this happened in 1930s and it's happening again now. I really understand the war on a whole different level, because I just didn't realize it. And so this whole thing about how, you're writing about the 1930s, but the same thing is happening because we didn't learn, because this history was suppressed. So, when we suppress, this is what happens. But, it's that ping that goes off in their head, how relevant this is to what's happening now. Thank you for all of the thought-provoking questions. Thank you, Marcia. And thank you, Valentina.
Thank you. First of all, I want to extend our thanks to Marcia Skrypuch for writing this wonderful, excellent novel, and for taking the time to talk about it with us tonight. I know it's from what we heard, it was an emotional experience for you. And I know when I was reading it, it was an emotional experience for me as well. And I think the young people will feel that as well. Also, thanks go out to our host, Mateusz Switlitsky, for being willing to get up in the middle of the night between 1 and 2 a.m. in Poland to grace us with his presence, his knowledge, and expertise to make this a very special webinar. Kudos to you both for doing a fabulous job. It's been a real pleasure. HREC Education, as Marcia already mentioned, is making a limited number of virtual school visits with Marcia possible for middle grade classes who are in schools with financial challenges. If you want more information about this, please visit our HREC Education website or Marcia's website, and there'll be more information for you there as well. As for everyone who came to participate tonight, in the chat, you will see there is a list of books about the Holodomor that are suitable for different grade levels that you may be interested in downloading for future use, and they could be very useful. Our next Thursday evening webinar will be held on November the 17th at the same time, that is 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. We will be looking at a unique and newly published graphic novel on the Holodomor by Adrian Lysenko and illustrated by Ivanka Theodosia Galadze, entitled 5 Stalks of Grain. We will be talking to both of them and looking at some of its illustrated pages. So I hope you will be able to join us. For additional information, that you might need about the Holodomor, with plenty of teacher resources and teaching materials, please visit our website, education.holodomor.ca. Also, consider applying for our annual HREC Educator Award for Holodomor lesson plan development, which is information on that is on our website as well. And if you don't have already downloaded our annual Holodomor Memorial Day pamphlet, please do so. It highlights basic information about the Holodomor, an announcement, and other resources that you could use in the classroom during Holodomor Education Week, which is in November. Holodomor Memorial Day in schools is on the fourth Friday in November annually, and this year it's November the 25th. If you need a text for teaching the Holodomor, there is information about my book, Holodomor in Ukraine, for teachers and students, and it's on information about that is on our website as well. Once more, thank you to all participants and for your interest in teaching the Holodomor. As Marcia said, it was a hidden secret. And even though I studied history, we always had to talk to our professors to tell them that this happened, and most of them didn't believe you to start with. In light of what is happening with the Russian war in Ukraine today, we see strong parallels between what happened in Ukraine during the Holodomor under Stalin, a genocide, and what is happening in Ukraine today. So we will see you again, hopefully, at the next webinar in November. Good night. Remember, we don't have bombs flying over our heads, so we can sleep quietly, but others cannot. So good night and do побачення. See you soon.
До побачення.
До побачення.